Hello everybody, it's Mike at Gamefromscratch, and it is Sunday, so that of course means it is time for This Week in Game Development for the week ending April 17th. This Week in Game Development is a quick recap of the news and events happening in the world of game development, and without further ado, let's jump right in. Now, as always, or at least as of about 2 or 3 of these ago, I started doing up a single post with all of the links that we're going to discuss today. A bit of a spoiler alert here, here's what we're going to discuss today, but I'm going to link this down below as opposed to individual links for each of the different stories. And as you can see from this massive list of 5 items, there wasn't a whole lot that happened this week. But without further ado, let's jump right in and start with the beginning of the week. Now, first off, we saw the release of Getros 2016.4. I actually like that naming convention, by the way, because it immediately tells you when it was released. Now, if a version is, 0.0.6, that doesn't really tell you anything. So I actually like chronological release values like that. Very clear in my head. It makes a lot of sense. I kind of wish more people would go down that road. Now, anyways, Getros is a Lua-based all-in-one game engine. It used to be commercial, but it is now open source, very donation-driven. So if you do like it, please do donate to keep it going and keeping it alive. But it was competitor to the likes of Love, Moi, and probably closest is Corona. It's a full editing environment for Lua development 2D games, mostly for mobile. Well, the biggest thing in the 2016.4 release is it now has HTML5 target support, so you can now deploy your games to the web browser and run full screen and run at 60 frames per second, assuming, of course, you have well-optimized code that can run at 60 frames per second. That is hands down the big thing about this release. So Getros now has HTML5 support. Now, what's kind of cool is they actually sponsored that using, I think it was a Kickstarter, either a Kickstarter or an Indiegogo campaign. And that's kind of a cool approach. So, like, if you want to have certain functionality added to your game engine of choice, support it. And I think this is a neat approach. I hope things work out for Getros going down this road, because selling packaged software these days, like they used to before, just seems to be a dead end. Now, in addition to the HTML5 target in this release, there's a number of smaller fixes and changes. Nothing overwhelmingly excited. Path2D texture support, player handle discovery, I don't even know what that means, and a couple of fixes. But that is Getros 2016.4's release. Next up, another release is PlayCanvas. PlayCanvas is an HTML5 browser-based editor, 3D game engine, all in one. It's actually really quite cool, and if you go to... I'm super zoomed right now, but if you go into game engine section of Gamefromscratch, you will notice somewhere, PlayCanvas, that I have covered PlayCanvas both in text and in video form. It is a cool looking engine. If you are doing 3D development in HTML5, I would definitely check it out. It is a very cool project. It is quite capable. So there you can see the editor in action. It's been evolving quite nicely since. Now, sadly, I think I just left the page that actually contained what was new to this release. But the biggest new thing they've added is runtime light map generation. Now, runtime light maps are a very cool thing to add. Light maps are, if you've worked in Unity or Unreal Engine and you've gone through the baking process, well, that's what you're baking. Basically, you're baking your lights into the textures in the scenes. You can get a whole lot more detail for a little bit of GPU processing power because it's basically textures as opposed to being calculated dynamically. So light maps can cause a whole much more realism at a much better performance target. So it's a very cool feature to add. Now, the thing is, generally it's done in tooling. So what happens is, as part of your level build, or when you make your game or save your game, it takes all the lights and calculates the light maps for you. In an HTML5 based game engine, that's not generally the route that they want to go. So what they've done is when your application starts up, it generates all the light maps for you. And they've got a video showing it in effect. Was there anything else in this release? Performance updates. A couple new features. I think there was more to this release, to be honest. But anyways, the big thing is definitely this runtime light generation. And where did the video go? Right here. You can see the effects of light maps right in this demonstration. As you can see a scene, so it's running at 60 frames per second here. Now, it's kind of funny. When I did this on my primary laptop, it was actually the same speed. It was capped at 60 frames per second using either approach. So here you can see this is the light mapped scene running. It's not actually running. Try full screen. Nope. All right, their demo is not working particularly well on my computer. Probably a few versions out of date, so maybe that's why it's not working. So sorry about that, but they do have this nice demonstration, which normally looks quite pretty, that illustrates the effect of light maps on your frames per second. And it is a pretty profound increase, especially on low-end hardware. When you're on a desktop, like I'm running on a, well, it's supposed to be running anyways, on a NVIDIA dedicated GPU on my desktop here, so obviously, you know, it can run a WebGL pretty easy. But when you're talking on a constrained phone, then light maps can really make a huge advantage there. All right, so moving on, now we're going to talk about CocoCreator. 1.0.1 was released. Now, I also just recently covered CocoCreator, both in text and video form. You can see that here if you wish more details. That is the video. Actually, I may have only done a video on this one. But anyways, this is CocoCreator. It is a version, it's a game editor and engine for 2D game development built on top of the Cocos 2DX project, specifically their JavaScript component. So it enables you to create games. It's got, you know, a GUI builder, a scene builder, etc. All these various tools in there. This release added a few things, mostly fixes, if I'm honest. Nothing extremely exciting in this actual release, but it is an incremental improvement, so that's nice to see. Then we will jump ahead one. Another game engine like PlayCanvas is called GoCreate. Another works in the browser engine for WebGL development. I don't know why my video is not showing. My browser is just being really stupid today. But GoCreate is another WebGL-based game engine you can definitely check out. This one brings live editing. Live editing is a very cool feature. Basically allows you to make updates to your code or your game data on the fly while playing your game, and they immediately update. So it allows you to tweak values and change things really quickly. If you go to this link with a browser that actually works, you can actually see a video of it here. I seem to be having some issues today with mine. So you're not seeing them particularly well here, but there is definitely a video showing live editing in action. And there's a couple of other changes in this actual release. Better zip file names for your exported scene. JS files bundled, various changes into the API, etc. Just another incremental increase. The biggest thing there was the live editing. It's kind of cool that these full functioning 3D browser-based game engines are actually kind of viable. I've heard some people say that GoCreate is glacially slow. I haven't had a lot of experience with it. I've only really jumped in with the PlayCanvas between the two. But GoCreate is something I'm going to look at some point in the future. But these full engines and editors in the browser creating other browser games, it's a cool concept. It's something that I would have probably never imagined would have come about, especially if you're old like me and you remember way back there was something called VRML, which was the whole idea of like 3D in the browser, and it was a dog and it went nowhere, so we kind of gave up on this stuff. So it's cool that WebGL worked and these things are becoming viable and you can create some really cool experiences in them. Alright, so the final piece of news is kind of a depressing one, and that is the death of RoboVM. And I'm not going to go into a great deal of detail on this because, quite frankly, I already did a video on it. It's bad news. It's just simply bad news. What happened is RoboVM is the underlying technology that allows you to run Java applications on iOS. And basically, it was used as a backend for libgdx. So if you wanted to run a libgdx Java application on an iPhone or an iPad or Apple TV, you used RoboVM to deploy it. And essentially, that's what it was. And a couple of months ago, 4 or 5, I think, maybe even more, Xamarin, the people that make Mono and more specifically Xamarin, which is what enables you to run .NET applications on Android and iOS. Well, they bought RoboVM. And back then, what they did right away, you see this little conversation I had with Nat Freeman, who is the CEO of Xamarin. And basically, they made it available for free for libgdx developers for lifetime, for as long as I'm the CEO of Xamarin. Well, that's a choice set of words because, Microsoft bought Xamarin about 2 or 3 months ago, which is actually for the majority of us is good news. What they did is they bought Xamarin and made their technology suite open source, except for RoboVM. Now, RoboVM is kind of the odd child out. It uses Java. Java is stewarded or owned by the most sue-happy dickish company that exists, also known as Oracle. So there's a reason why people kind of want to keep hands off from Java. Like Microsoft got sued over Java. Google is being sued over Java. Java is kind of patently toxic. So I can understand why Microsoft would want to not play with that field. I'd get the hell away because I don't want to get sued again. Now, RoboVM was a small company, 5 or 6 people. They're not going to get sued. Microsoft, with their deep pockets, yeah, they would get sued. So it does make sense for them to divest of RoboVM. Unfortunately, the way they did it was both noble and awful. The noble part is everybody that ever bought RoboVM is getting a discount, getting a rebate if they want it. Like, they're getting all their money back, which is very kind of cool. So if you invested in RoboVM technology, your actual investment cash-wise is coming back. Your investment time-wise, not so much. Basically, you have 1 year. Your license is good until 2017. At that point, you need to migrate over to something else. Everybody else, though, is just screwed. So you can't get a new license. So if you are starting a libgdx project today, you just simply cannot deploy to iOS yet. However, there are a couple things in the works. First off, libgdx itself did a write-up and looked at the various different options that are available, and they chose the Intel Multi-OS engine. It's 95% of the way there, should be up within a couple of weeks, so there is a new backend going. On top of that, there is a project called BugVM. One of the worst names I've ever heard, but yeah. And what they did is way back, like 6 months ago, so like ancient times by internet standards, RoboVM was an open source project, and they've got the last bit of open source code. So basically, without the last 6 months or 8 months of changes, whatever it's been, they've forked that and they're creating a project. And I believe it runs today. So if you are looking at deploying, you can now switch to BugVM, which is available in IntelliJ as a plugin, and probably deploy and replace RoboVM as it goes. So we'll wait and see what happens with that project going forward. Maybe some of the developers will pick up on it and it will become the new option. And at the end of the day, nothing really changes. Now, where I fault Microsoft in all this, I suppose, is I really wish they just open sourced the code. That would have been the simplest thing to do. Take the newest code, contribute it to the BugVM people, and say, here you go. Here is everything up to date. We're killing it anyways. Have fun. And they didn't. And that's kind of where they suck a bit. I can understand, again, why they want to get out of there. Oracle has made Java a very toxic place to be. And I get it. And I get why, if you were a company that gets sued a lot with billions of dollars in your pocket, why you wouldn't touch Java with a 10-foot pole these days. So I understand Microsoft's thought process, but just killing the project off and just letting the source code die, especially for a project that was open source just less than a year ago, that's a crap move. So hopefully Microsoft comes around, releases the source code out there, and then the world goes on as a happy place. But as you can see from this list here, there are a number of alternatives. This one is the one being most actively pursued right now by the the libgdx team. So there should be a transitionary plan right away. Now, if you want to hear a little bit more about this, if you go to the recap of today's events, the different stories, you'll see there's here a video available that I actually did on this subject in a little bit more depth, but I did a pretty good coverage of what I covered there. I think I swore a little bit more in the video if you're interested, but that's about it. And frankly, that's about it for this week. There wasn't a whole lot that went on this week. A couple of WebGL releases for the most part. Getros getting HTML5 support is definitely a cool thing. One thing that didn't make my list, though, sort of I missed out on it, and then I couldn't really make a good story about it, but I guess I should make it well known. Oh God, why don't I remember the name of it? Microsoft Visual Studio Code, which if you have not checked it out, you should. It's very, very cool. It is a text editor. And that doesn't sound that exciting, but it's a very good text editor. It's actually my go-to text editor now. It's replaced Sublime Text on my machine, and it replaced Brackets, which is god-awful slow. It's fast to load, it's powerful, it's got good refactoring tools. It's mostly for JavaScript development, but there's also TypeScript and C# in there. And it's extensible, so it's being extended and highlighted by all kinds of people in the community. So this is a very nice, lightweight cross-platform. It's available on other platforms, by the way, not just Windows. So you see there's Linux and Mac versions available. It's completely free. So if you need a JavaScript code editor or a TypeScript code editor or possibly even a C# code editor, Visual Studio Code is very cool. And why it comes up in the news is they just hit the 1.0 release. Now, there was nothing really special in that 1.0 release, so I never really made a news story about it. But it is a good time to go ahead and... So here is 1.0. Yeah, so they added new languages, and then some just sort of simplified and created. So it didn't make for a very interesting news release, but a 1.0 milestone is a milestone. This is tangentially related to game development, I suppose. If you're doing web-based development, this is a great, free, really powerful text editor with great integration into source control. Good refactoring tools, good plugin support. So it's being adopted by quite a few people out there as their sort of editing environment. So it's definitely one of those projects to keep an eye on. If you haven't checked it out yet, I recommend you download Visual Studio Code. It's trivially small, I think under 10 megs in size. It's a very cool, lightweight, powerful editor. And it just turned 1.0. So, hey, congratulations, Microsoft, on turning 1.0 with Visual Studio Code. Now stop being a dick and release the RoboVM source codes. Ha! That's a good way to end it. So that's this week in game development. I hope you enjoyed it. See you all next week.